I want you to put yourself in a very specific and just incredibly uncomfortable situation.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah, so picture this. The year is 1962. You're 24 years old. You're fresh out of business school, and you find yourself sitting in this deeply formal wood-paneled boardroom in Kobe, Japan.
Right.
And across this massive table from you sits a row of seasoned, just formidable Japanese executives at a major shoe manufacturing company. And they are all staring at you.
Intimidating, to say the least.
Exactly. The silence in the room is heavy. It's that kind of deafening quiet where you can literally hear your own heartbeat in your ears.
Yeah, the tension is just palpable.
And then the lead executive leans forward, looks you right in the eye, and asks a very simple, standard business question. He says, "What company are you with?"
Which is literally the one question you were praying they wouldn't ask.
Right, because the reality of the situation is, well, it's almost comical. You don't have a company.
No.
You don't have a storefront. You don't have an office. You have absolutely no staff. You barely have enough money in your pocket to buy a decent dinner.
You're just a kid.
Yeah. You are literally just a kid from Oregon who showed up with a wild idea. You have a split second to answer. Your brain is just scrambling.
Right, because if you hesitate, it's over.
Exactly. And in that moment of pure, just panicked improvisation, you visualize your childhood bedroom back in Portland. You see the wall covered in your old high school track and field ribbons. You take a breath, you look the executives dead in the eye, and you confidently blurt out, "Blue Ribbon Sports of Portland, Oregon."
It is a breathtaking bluff.
Wow.
I mean, the audacity it takes to pull that off in a room full of industry veterans is just staggering.
It really is.
But that terrifying leap into the unknown, that single moment of panic invention, is the exact second. The seed for a global multi-billion-dollar empire really took root because that 24-year-old kid was Phil Knight.
Yep.
And that imaginary improvised company, Blue Ribbon Sports, is what we all know today as Nike.
It's wild to think about.
It really is.
So today on our deep dive, we are jumping into the source material that chronicles this exact era. Specifically, we're looking at the first chapter of Phil Knight's memoir, Shoe Dog, covering pages 13 through 44.
A fantastic section of the book.
Oh, absolutely. We are exploring the pivotal year of 1962. We're going to trace his path from pitching a truly, what he called his crazy idea about importing Japanese running shoes, to pitching that to his highly skeptical father.
Right, which was a hurdle in itself.
A huge hurdle. And then failing miserably as a door-to-door salesman in Hawaii, and finally embarking on this solo backpacking trip around the world that fundamentally shatters and reshapes his entire understanding of life and business.
Yeah, and for anyone tuning in who is, interested in business or entrepreneurship or even just the psychology of how big things actually get built, this chapter is an absolute masterclass.
It really is.
Because it fundamentally dismantles the myth that you need, like a perfectly polished business plan and a ton of capital and an ironclad strategy to start something massive.
Right, like you have to have it all figured out before day one.
Exactly. What you actually need, and what the source material shows us, is the courage to take the first step into ambiguity, the humility to let your failures teach you, and honestly, the willingness to just bluff when the universe puts you on the spot.
So true. So the journey to that boardroom in Kobe begins a long time before he even buys a plane ticket.
Oh boy.
It starts with what Knight literally capitalizes in his mind as his crazy idea.
With capital letters?
Yes, capital C, capital I. He's a runner. He ran track at the University of Oregon. He just finished his master's at Stanford. And he has become absolutely obsessed with a research paper he wrote for a seminar.
Right. And the premise of this paper is incredibly straightforward.
Yeah, explain the premise, because it's pretty clever.
So, Japanese cameras had recently entered the American market and completely undercut the dominant German brands. Nikon and Canon coming in and taking on Leica and Zeiss. So he thinks, well, why couldn't Japanese running shoes do the exact same thing to German shoe giants like Adidas and Puma?
Which, we hear that today and think, well, obviously, that's just sound market disruption. It makes perfect sense.
It makes sense to us now, yeah. But we have to actively, strip away our modern hindsight and plant ourselves firmly in the reality of 1962 to grasp how utterly unhinged this sounded to anyone he pitched it to.
Unhinged is a good word for it.
Seriously. First of all, the concept of global travel for business, especially for a kid, was incredibly rare. 90% of Americans had never even set foot on an airplane.
90%? That's a crazy statistic.
Yeah, and on top of that, the statistical failure rate for new businesses was terrifying. The book notes that 26 out of 27 new companies failed in their first year.
Which is just a bleak environment to try and start anything.
It really is.
But there's a much bigger elephant in the room here, which the source material brings up, and I think it's crucial context. The United States and Japan were just 17 years out from a catastrophic world war.
That is the defining cultural context of this entire endeavor. I mean, 17 years is nothing. The wounds were incredibly fresh.
Yeah, the book actually mentions his grandmother, Mom Hatfield. She has this visceral, paralyzing fear of the Japanese.
Right.
To her, they aren't potential business partners. They are the enemy she heard about on the radio every single night while her country was at war.
It's deeply ingrained trauma.
Exactly. She is legitimately terrified that if he goes to Japan, they're going to take him prisoner and, to quote her directly from the book, gouge out your eyeballs.
Yeah, that's intense.
That is the baseline emotional climate he is operating in. It's not just, oh, this is a risky business. It's, you're going to sleep with the enemy and they're going to hurt you.
And that cultural climate makes his primary obstacle even more daunting, which is getting the seed money.
Right. He needs $1,000 to travel to Japan and try to pitch this idea.
And the only person he can really ask is his father.
Which is a whole dynamic in itself. Let's unpack the dad a little bit. He's the publisher of the Oregon Journal, right?
Yes. He is a prominent, well-respected figure in Portland. And he is a man who absolutely worships at the altar of respectability.
Right. Respectability is everything to him.
He values his quiet suburban life, his predictable routine, his colonial house. In his worldview, gallivanting around the globe on a whim is what beatniks do.
It's what hippies do.
Exactly. It is absolutely not what a respectable young man with a Stanford degree does.
I was trying to think of a modern equivalent to this, and pitching an import business with a former wartime enemy to a conservative 1950s-era dad. It's basically like a fresh college grad sitting their risk-averse, pension-collecting parents down today and saying, hey, I'm going to skip the corporate job you paid for, and instead I need you to drain your savings so I can fly to a country we're currently under trade embargo with to buy unproven crypto technology from a factory I've never seen.
The parents would just shut it down immediately. They'd look at you like you were out of your mind.
Exactly. They'd say absolutely not. Which makes Knight's approach to getting this money a really fascinating study in persuasion.
It really is, because he doesn't just walk into the kitchen and hand his dad a spreadsheet.
No, he orchestrates it.
He orchestrates the whole pitch. He actually calls it the TV Nook pitch.
The TV Nook pitch.
He waits until the early evening. His dad has had dinner. He's relaxed in his vinyl recliner, and he's watching his favorite Westerns on television, specifically Wagon Train.
Setting the mood.
Right. Knight comes in, having completely rehearsed his talking points, and he delivers this massive hard sell.
And this is the brilliant part, the hard sell isn't actually about the shoes, is it?
Not really, no.
He starts talking about wanting to see the world. He brings up the Himalayas. He talks about the pyramids, the Dead Sea. He makes it sound like this grand romantic expedition.
He heavily leans into the adventure of it all. He frames the shoe business almost as the excuse to go on the journey. And the remarkable thing is, the father caves.
He actually says yes.
He agrees to give him the money.
Yeah.
But if you read the subtext of the sources, he doesn't agree because the market analysis of the Japanese shoe industry is just so bulletproof.
Right.
He agrees because Knight unwittingly touches a nerve. His father harbors this deep, unspoken regret that he never traveled the world when he was a young man.
Wait, let's pause there for a second. So he secures the funding for his business, not on the merit of the business plan, but purely through vicarious ambition.
Essentially, yes.
That's wild.
It is. And the practical takeaway here for anyone trying to get buy-in for a radical idea is that you have to understand the hidden emotional drivers of your audience.
Because logic and data rarely open wallets on their own.
Exactly. Knight's logic about German market share might have fallen completely flat, but the emotional appeal of a global adventure, something his father secretly wished he had done, that is what actually sealed the deal.
Find the emotional resonance, and the logic will follow.
Precisely. So he gets the grand sum of $1,000.
Right.
He packs his bags, and he heads off with a college buddy named Carter. And the plan is to fly straight to Tokyo.
But they don't go straight to Tokyo.
No. They decide to make a quick pit stop in Hawaii. And the second they step off the plane, the entire grand business plan completely evaporates.
Just poof, gone.
They see Waikiki Beach, they see the surfs, they see the girls, and they just say, you know what? We live here now.
It is the ultimate entrepreneurial detour. They are supposed to be building a shoe empire, and instead, they rent a tiny furnished studio apartment for $100 a month.
And it's so small that Knight actually has to sleep on a fold-out ironing board.
An ironing board, I can't even imagine. But to sustain this surfer paradise lifestyle, they obviously need cash. So they do what a lot of young guys did back then. They get jobs selling encyclopedias door to door.
Which, if you know anything about Phil Knight's personality as described in the book, sounds like an absolute medieval torture device.
Oh, totally. He is naturally introverted, he is quiet, he's very thoughtful.
And door-to-door encyclopedia sales require a loud, abrasive, foot-in-the-door mentality.
Which he does not have.
Not at all. So he fails spectacularly.
Yeah.
The constant door slamming in his face, the abrasive rejection, it completely dismantles his confidence.
Yeah, in the text, he compares the feeling of that rejection to getting cut from his high school freshman baseball team.
That's a great analogy.
It's not just a business failure, it's this deep personal sting of being told you aren't good enough.
It hurts.
But here is where the narrative throws a massive curveball, and I need you to make this make sense for me because it sounds totally contradictory.
Let's hear it.
He quits the encyclopedia gig because he hates selling. The rejection is killing him. He then answers a newspaper ad and gets a job selling Dreyfus mutual funds in a classic 1960s boiler room environment run by Bernard Kornfeld's company.
Yes.
Now, for the audience, a boiler room back then meant a crammed office full of aggressive guys, chain-smoking, hammering the phones, reading these high-pressure scripts to force people to buy financial products.
There's a Shark Tank.
Exactly. So you were telling me a guy who was too shy to sell a book somehow thrived in the most notoriously aggressive sales environment on Earth. How is that even remotely possible?
It seems like a massive contradiction until you look at the mechanism of why he hated encyclopedias.
Okay.
He didn't hate selling. He hated performing. When he was selling encyclopedias, he was forced to recite a canned, manipulative script about things he really didn't care about.
Oh, I see.
It felt fake to him, and people could smell that fakeness.
So it wasn't the rejection that bothered him so much, it was the inauthenticity of what he was doing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now contrast that with the mutual funds. Knight wasn't a smooth talker, but he was a numbers guy. He understood the stock market.
Right.
He understood the value of the Dreyfus funds. So when he got on the phone, he wasn't doing a song and dance. He was simply explaining the mathematics of a product he believed was genuinely good.
And people responded to that.
People on the other end of the line responded to his quiet, knowledgeable authenticity. He didn't have to be a shark. He just had to be an expert in the product.
That reframes so much about how we view sales. The lesson isn't to force yourself to become some loud, aggressive caricature of a salesperson if that's not who you are.
Exactly.
The lesson is to find a product or a service where your natural curiosity and your native knowledge do the heavy lifting for you.
And you have to embrace the painful failure, because the failure with the encyclopedias is what forced him to discover his natural operating style.
He had to fail at being fake to realize he just needed to be real.
Exactly.
So while he is figuring out his professional footing in Hawaii, the world outside his window is literally on the verge of total annihilation. It is the fall of 1962, and the Cuban Missile Crisis hits.
The contrast here is incredibly cinematic.
It's surreal.
You have this young guy trying to figure out his career path, and meanwhile, the geopolitical tension of the Cold War reaches its absolute peak.
The scene in the book is just, it's wild. They're sitting in these smoky dive bars along the Hawaiian waterfront. They're drinking Mai Tais, looking out at the Pacific Ocean, genuinely calculating the blast radius of a Soviet nuclear weapon.
Yeah, they're assuming they are going to see a mushroom cloud appear on the horizon at any second.
It's this weird mix of tropical paradise and impending doom, like, well, the world is ending, might as well have another drink.
Right. But the mushroom cloud never appears.
Thankfully.
The crisis resolves. And that realization that the world is going to keep spinning triggers a massive shift in Knight.
How so?
He looks around this beautiful Hawaiian Shangri-La and realizes he can't just hide out on a beach forever.
Yeah.
The brush with global mortality creates an internal urgency.
Like, life is short. I need to get moving.
Exactly. So he tells his friend Carter, it's time to leave. We have to go to Japan.
And Carter, who has, completely fallen in love with the local girl and the island lifestyle, says, I'm out. I'm staying here.
Which forces Knight into a very tight corner. He can either take his tail between his legs and fly back to his dad's colonial house in Oregon as a complete failure, or he can continue this terrifying journey across the Pacific Ocean entirely alone.
And he chooses the unknown.
He does. He buys an open plane ticket and flies to Tokyo.
Which Tokyo in 1962 is not the neon-lit, hyper-modern metropolis we think of today.
Not at all.
The source material paints a very bleak picture. Vast sections of the city are still leveled from the fire bombings of the war. There are blackouts at night. It is a deeply intimidating environment, especially for a young American who doesn't speak a word of the language.
It would be overwhelming.
But instead of just rushing straight into a boardroom to pitch his shoes, he does something incredibly strategic. He seeks out two American ex-GIs who stuck around after the war to run a magazine called Importer.
And those ex-GIs become his cultural translators. They give him a massive crash course in the funhouse rules of doing business in Japan.
The funhouse rules. I like that.
They explain that if he walks in there with a hard American sales pitch, demanding answers, pushing for a quick close, he will be rejected immediately.
Right.
Japanese business culture, they tell him, relies heavily on indirection and saving face.
Someone once compared this to modern dating culture, where nobody wants to actually say, I'm not interested in you, so they just vaguely string you along or politely ghost you so they don't have to deliver bad news.
That's a very apt analogy for how an American would perceive it back then. The GIs tell him no one will ever give you a flat no, but they also won't give you a straightforward yes.
Which is so confusing.
It is a culture of soft, sinewy nuance. Everything is read between the lines.
Which has to be a nightmare for a guy who just wants to talk about running shoes and profit margins. How does he even prepare his mind for that kind of ambiguity?
Well, he turns to Zen philosophy.
Zen philosophy?
Yeah. Before his meeting, he spends days wandering through ancient Japanese gardens, reading books on Buddhism and Shinto. He starts internalizing concepts like forgetting the self and nonlinear thinking.
I have to admit, when I first read that part, it felt a little bit like a gap year cliche.
Sure.
The young American goes to Asia and suddenly thinks he's a Zen master.
Yeah.
Is there actual business utility in this, or is he just killing time?
Oh, it is entirely functional.
Really?
Yes. He explicitly contrasts the profound stillness of the Zen gardens with the absolute chaos he witnesses at the Tokyo Stock Exchange. He goes to the exchange and sees just madness.
Right.
So he is trying to reconcile these two extremes. Is business just men screaming at each other over fractions of a penny? Or is there a deeper, more mindful way to operate?
Okay, that makes sense.
Immersing himself in Zen wasn't a spiritual distraction, it was psychological armor. It trained him to sit comfortably in silence, to not rush to fill the void, and to accept ambiguity, which is exactly what he needed to survive the upcoming negotiation.
He had to learn how not to shill the silence.
Exactly. American business people hate silence. We want to fill it. He had to learn to sit in it.
And that preparation gets put to the test when he finally secures a meeting with Onitsuka, the company that manufactures tiger shoes.
The big moment.
He leaves Tokyo and takes this grueling 7-hour train ride south to Kobe. The train is filthy, he's exhausted, but he finally arrives at the factory. And there's this wonderful sensory detail in the book. He walks in and hears the rhythmic, musical sound of the shoe lasts. Cling-clong, cling-clong.
Right. And for listeners who might not be familiar with manufacturing terminology, a shoe last is a solid mechanical mold shaped like a human foot.
Okay.
Shoemakers stretch the leather and the fabric over these lasts to build the physical shape of the shoe. That sound he hears is the sound of heavy wood and metal molds hitting the tables.
It's the heartbeat of the factory.
It really is.
So he is ushered into a conference room. He's seated across from a row of senior executives, and you can just feel the historical tension in the room.
The subtext is incredibly heavy. These are proud businessmen of a nation that was recently devastated by war, and sitting across from them is a 24-year-old citizen of the conquering nation, asking them for a business partnership.
And that brings us right back to the moment we opened the show with.
The bluff.
Right. They ask him, what company are you with? He panics. He visualizes the track ribbons on his childhood bedroom wall, and he invents Blue Ribbon Sports, completely out of thin air.
Just pulls it right out of the ether.
Now, I want to challenge this narrative a bit, because we celebrate this as a stroke of entrepreneurial genius, right? A brilliant pivot.
Sure.
But objectively speaking, isn't he just lying to their faces? I mean, if I walk into a bank and invent a fake company to get a loan, that's fraud.
It is a bluff. There's no denying that. But we have to distinguish between a hollow lie and a calculated bluff backed by extreme competence.
Okay. Unpack that for me.
Yes, the legal entity of Blue Ribbon Sports did not exist in a filing cabinet in Oregon, but the expertise he was representing was entirely real.
Explain the difference. How is the expertise real if the company isn't?
When the Japanese executives move past the company name and start grilling him on the viability of the American shoe market, Knight doesn't stutter. He doesn't invent numbers.
Because he knows the numbers.
Exactly. He flawlessly recites the deeply researched data from his Stanford master's thesis. He maps out the demographics. He breaks down the weaknesses of the German competitors like Adidas. He confidently predicts that the U.S. market for athletic shoes will hit $1 billion.
Wow. So the shell was fake, but the engine inside it was real.
That's a great way to put it. The lesson here isn't lie to get what you want. The phrase fake it till you make it is dangerously misunderstood.
Because people use it as an excuse to just pretend they know what they're doing when they don't.
Right. Faking it only works if you have actually done the underlying work.
Yeah.
Phil Knight could improvise a company name under terrifying pressure because he had spent months locked in the Stanford library, obsessing over the actual data.
He had the knowledge.
When he spoke about the market, he wasn't faking his authority. He had earned it.
And his authority commands the room. The executives are impressed. They actually ask if this imaginary company, Blue Ribbon Sports, would be interested in representing Tiger shoes in the United States.
Which is just an incredible moment of validation.
Knight plays it totally cool. He holds up a training shoe model called the Limber Up. He tells them he'll send a $50 money order for a batch of samples, and he walks out of that factory with a handshake deal to become their American distributor.
It is a massive triumph.
Mess.
It is the defining victory of his young life. But what he chooses to do the next morning is, I think, even more revealing about his character.
Yeah, because he has the deal. The logical move would be to get on the next flight back to Portland, register his company, and wait by the mailbox for the shoes.
Let's start the business.
Right. But he doesn't go home. He continues his open-ended solo journey around the world, and we have to talk about this part of chapter because it takes up a significant amount of the narrative.
It's a huge part of the book.
He visits Hong Kong. He goes to Manila, Bangkok, Vietnam. He travels through India, Africa, and Europe. This isn't a vacation. It reads more like a grueling existential gauntlet.
It is an educational pilgrimage, and it's brutal.
It really is. When he gets to Calcutta, India, he contracts a severe virus. He is lying in a filthy hammock suspended over a hole in the ground in agonizing pain, genuinely believing he is going to die right there.
Yeah, he's basically on his deathbed.
And he survives the night, and the very next day, he is walking along the Ganges River, watching human bodies being openly cremated on funeral pyres. This is heavy, traumatic stuff for a kid from suburban Oregon.
Absolutely.
Which begs the question, why is this long, dark travelogue taking up so much space in a book about building a sneaker empire?
That's the core question. And the answer is because you cannot understand the business he built without understanding the worldview he forged on that exact trip.
Tell me more about that.
He wasn't traveling to look at tourist attractions. He was studying the extremes of the human condition. He was obsessed with understanding the warrior spirit.
The warrior spirit.
Yes, he read constantly about historical figures who shaped the world. Generals like Douglas MacArthur and George Patton, leaders like Winston Churchill, visionaries like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo.
He's trying to reverse engineer greatness.
Yes. And simultaneously, he is witnessing crushing, systemic, inescapable poverty.
Right, the contrast is stark.
Exactly. He stands in front of the Sphinx in Egypt and realizes that the millions of people who built these monumental structures are entirely forgotten by history.
Wow.
He is slammed with the reality of mortality. He internalizes the idea that human life is painfully, unfairly short. And the synthesis of those two realizations, human greatness and human brevity, creates his core drive.
Which is what?
He decides that if he is going to spend his fleeting time on Earth building something, it has to matter. It cannot just be about making money. It has to leave a lasting mark.
It has to have meaning. And the climax of this entire philosophical awakening happens when he reaches Greece.
Yes, this is an incredible moment.
He climbs up to the Acropolis in Athens. He is drawn to a specific structure, the Temple of Athena Nike. Now, his guidebook explicitly mentions that Athena Nike is the goddess of victory, and crucially for our story, she is the patron saint of negotiators.
Right.
As he is looking at the temple, he notices a specific stone carving of the goddess. She is leaning down to adjust the strap of her shoe.
You almost couldn't write it in a fiction novel because it would feel way too on the nose.
It feels completely scripted by the universe. He is standing there in 1962 looking at the goddess Nike adjusting her shoe.
Yeah.
This is nearly a decade before he ever officially changes the name of his company to Nike, Or pays a graphic design student $35 to draw the famous swoosh logo. It's like destiny was literally tapping him on the shoulder.
It has a very mythic quality to it. But if we pull it down to a practical takeaway for the listener, it proves a vital point about innovation.
Okay, what's that?
World-shifting business ideas do not generate in a vacuum.
Right.
They don't come from staring at a spreadsheet in a cubicle all day. They are informed by a wide, visceral understanding of the world.
By experiencing life.
Exactly. By forcing himself out of his comfortable bubble, by walking through war-torn cities and ancient ruins, Knight expanded his mental models. The inspiration for Nike required him to be standing on the Acropolis, armed with the context of history.
He couldn't have gotten that inspiration just sitting in his room in Oregon.
Impossible.
Which perfectly sets up the synthesis of everything we've talked about today regarding 1962. At the very beginning of this chapter, there is an epigraph. It's a quote from the famous Zen master Shunryu Suzuki.
Yes.
It reads, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few."
That single sentence is the DNA of this entire deep dive. The power of the beginner's mind.
Yeah.
When we look back at Phil Knight's actions in 1962, his absolute lack of experience was his greatest competitive advantage.
How so? Because usually we treat inexperience as a liability. We spend our whole lives trying to become experts so we don't make stupid mistakes.
Sure, but think about the context of the experts in his life at that time. The bankers, the seasoned executives, the men of his father's generation, they were all experts in how the world worked in 1962.
Right.
And because they were experts, they knew exactly what was impossible. They knew that pitching a Japanese import business to a post-WWII American consumer base was a terrible risk.
Because they knew the history.
Right. They knew the statistics on small business failures. Their expertise completely blinded them to anything outside the established norms.
But Knight didn't know any better.
Exactly. He was young. He was naive. He didn't know you weren't supposed to invent a company name in the middle of a boardroom negotiation.
Right.
He didn't know you weren't supposed to trust a foreign manufacturer you just met. Because he lacked the rigid framework of the expert, his mind was completely open to possibilities that everyone else had already written off.
It completely flips the script on imposter syndrome.
Oh, totally.
When you feel like you don't know what you're doing, you assume you're failing. But this story argues that not knowing what you're doing is actually the fertile ground where innovation happens. You aren't weighed down by the baggage of how things have always been done.
Exactly. A beginner asks the questions that the experts stopped asking decades ago.
That is a brilliant place to wrap up this chapter. So let me set the scene for where we leave our protagonist.
Okay, take us there.
It is February 1963. Phil Knight finally returns home to Portland, Oregon. He has long hair. He has a scraggly beard. He has completely run out of money. And he is moving right back into the exact same childhood bedroom where this whole idea started.
Full circle.
Right. He has traveled the entire globe. He has stared down his fears. He survived a severe illness. And he secured a massive international business deal.
But the victory lap doesn't happen.
Not at all, because as the weeks turn into months, the excitement fades into anxiety. He is just sitting in his parents' house waiting by the mailbox every single day, wondering a terrifying thought.
Did he just get played?
Exactly. Did he just get played?
Will those $50 Japanese shoe samples ever actually arrive? Or was the whole thing just a giant waste of time?
The suspense is real.
It is. And we will find out what happens next in our next deep dive.
And as we close out today's conversation, I want to leave everyone listening with a final provocative thought to chew on.
Let's hear it.
We spend so much of our careers desperately trying to project competence, trying to prove that we are the expert in the room.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone wants to be the smartest person there.
Right. But look at your own life right now. Are you letting the pressure to be an expert stop you from trying something entirely new? What crazy idea are you currently talking yourself out of simply because you are afraid of looking like a beginner?
That's a great question to end on. Thanks for breaking this all down with me today.
My pleasure.
So, have you ever come back from a truly life-altering experience and you're just completely ready to conquer the world?
Oh, yeah, like you're just fired up.
Right, exactly. You've got this massive vision and this absolute fire in your belly. But then, you find yourself just sitting in your childhood bedroom.
Yeah, eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something.
Literally that.
Yeah.
Just eating a PB&J and wondering if the best days of your life are just already behind you.
Which is such a brutal feeling.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because the universe is just giving you a dial tone.
Yeah.
We constantly hear about these explosive, glamorous starts to billion-dollar companies.
Right, the whole garage myth.
Yeah, we love the garage moments. We love the dramatic handshake deals and,
Ah.
the overnight success stories. But we rarely talk about the silence.
The silence is the hardest part.
It is. Like, what happens when you return home from a global adventure ready to launch your crazy idea and you are just with the deafening roar of absolutely nothing happening?
I mean, it is the ultimate anticlimax. And arguably, I'd say it's the most dangerous phase of any ambitious undertaking.
Really? The most dangerous?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's this period where dreams don't necessarily die in a fiery crash, right? They just quietly starve to death in this vacuum of waiting.
Wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, today we are immersing ourselves in one very specific and honestly often overlooked year in the creation of a global empire.
A very unglamorous year.
Totally. We are looking at Chapter 2 of Phil Knight's memoir, Shoe Dog, and we're focusing entirely on the year 1963.
Which is such a fascinating chunk of time to isolate.
It really is. Our source material for this deep dive gives us this incredibly raw look at a 20-something kid in a period characterized not by those glamorous business deals, but by just agonizing waiting.
And strategic hedging, too.
Yeah, strategic hedging and, honestly, a totally soul-crushing day job.
Yeah, we're looking at a phenomenon that a lot of people call the trough of sorrow.
The trough of sorrow. I like that.
Yeah, it has that inevitable, painful stretch where the initial adrenaline wears off and the reality of execution kind of sets in.
Right.
And you're just forced to build a pragmatic safety net. I mean, anyone who has ever tried to build something, whether it's a business or a career or even a creative project, has faced this exact kind of purgatory.
Yeah, it's a universal experience, really.
Yeah.
So understanding how this particular founder navigated 1963, it's basically a masterclass in surviving that gap between having a great idea and actually bringing it into the world.
Exactly.
And the contrast at the start of this chapter is just staggering. I mean, we are picking up right after this epic globetrotting journey.
Right. He's just been everywhere.
He's just been to Japan. He miraculously pitched himself as the American distributor for Tiger shoes. He's visited the Himalayas.
You saw the pyramids in Egypt?
Yeah, the pyramids. He stood in the temple of Nike in Greece. I mean, he is vibrating with worldly experience.
He's on top of the world.
He is. And then he comes back to Portland, Oregon.
Back to the burbs.
Right. He's sitting in his family's TV nook, showing travel slides to the neighbors.
Which is just such a funny image. You know, the slide projector clicking away.
Yeah, click, click. Here's me in front of a monument. But mentally, he's completely consumed by those shoe samples he ordered from the Japanese company Onitsuka.
Because that was the whole point of the trip for him, really.
Exactly. But he's just waiting. The shoes aren't there.
And you can really feel the psychological weight of that wait in the text. I mean, he fires off a letter to Japan, just desperate for an update.
Just begging for something.
Yeah, and eventually he gets this broken English reply back that says something like, shoes coming in just a little more days.
In just a little more days.
Yeah.
Which is just, I mean, it's the most agonizingly vague sentence you could possibly receive when your entire future is hanging in the balance.
It means absolutely nothing.
It means nothing. Up until this point, the dream was entirely in his control. It was in his head. It was in his notebook. It was in that pitch he gave in the boardroom in Kobe.
But now he's just stuck.
Yeah, now he's at the complete mercy of the International Post Office and a manufacturing partner halfway across the world.
And this is really the first great filter of entrepreneurship.
What do you mean by filter?
Well, it marks this brutal transition from the conceptual phase to the operational phase. Because when you have a crazy idea, you are running on pure dopamine and adrenaline.
Right. It's fun to have ideas.
Exactly. It's romantic. But the moment you have to rely on external partners who operate on their own timelines and, in different time zones across massive cultural and communication gaps, that romance just dies very quickly.
Oh, for sure.
That phrase, little more days, perfectly encapsulates the stark contrast between his internal burning urgency and the external world's complete indifference to his timeline.
The world does not care about your timeline.
Not at all.
It's honestly the 1960s equivalent of tracking an online package that is just stuck on label created for months.
Oh, man, we've all been there, just hitting refresh over and over.
Right, you just keep refreshing the page. But instead of a pair of novelty socks, it's your entire future on the line.
That is a great way to put it.
And to make matters worse, his family is literally sitting in the room watching him hit refresh.
Right, the slide projector audience.
Exactly. You have his father, who bankrolled that initial $50 shoe order just sitting in his vinyl recliner and openly doubting the entire venture.
Yeah, he actually chuckles and tells him that his $50 investment is long gone.
Long gone. Just brutal. Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because it's one thing to battle your own internal self-doubt, right?
Sure.
But how do you survive when the people under your own roof, like your dad, are basically confirming your worst fears?
Well, the father's skepticism is a crucial element of this whole environment. And we have to remember, he isn't necessarily trying to be cruel here.
Right, you have to look at the context.
Exactly. We have to contextualize him as a product of his time. He's a newspaper publisher in mid-century America who values respectability and stability and, mainstream success.
The standard American dream stuff.
Yeah. To him, selling Japanese track shoes out of a car trunk isn't a career. It's a pipe dream.
Right.
But structurally, what's fascinating here is how his skepticism acts as this unintended stress test for the founder's resolve.
Oh, a stress test. I like that.
Yeah, because it forces him to defend the idea even when there's zero proof it's going to work.
You realize very quickly reading this chapter that if you can't insulate your vision from the skepticism of your immediate environment, that external silence will just convince you that your idea is dead.
Long before you ever actually fail.
Exactly. Long before failure is even a reality.
And, nature abhors a vacuum. So while he's stuck in this holding pattern, the reality of being a 20-something adult kind of catches up with him.
The bills come due.
Yeah, he needs cash. He can't just sit in the TV nook forever playing slides.
Right. He needs a job while he waits for these mystical shoes to arrive.
Which leads to a really pivotal conversation. He initially thinks about taking the conventional route, maybe going to work for an investment firm like a Dean Witter.
Which would have made total sense.
Oh, yeah, it's respectable. It pays well. It would definitely make his dad happy.
Right. Get the suit, get the briefcase.
But his father actually sets up a meeting with an old friend of his, Don Frisbee, who is the CEO of Pacific Power and Light.
Okay.
And Frisbee gives him advice that on the surface feels entirely backward for an aspiring entrepreneur.
Okay, wait, yeah. He tells him to completely avoid the big corporate job or the investment firm, right?
Yeah, he says don't do it. Instead, he tells him to go get his CPA, become a certified public accountant.
Which sounds so incredibly boring compared to starting a global shoe brand.
It does, but Frisbee's logic is grounded in this deep understanding of career trajectories. He explains that a CPA combined with his existing MBA from Stanford will put a solid floor under his earnings.
A solid floor.
Right, because the reality is that everyone changes jobs multiple times.
Especially entrepreneurs.
Exactly. So when you inevitably jump ship or when a venture fails, having that credentialed floor means your earning potential won't crater. You won't start from zero.
It's such a fascinating piece of advice because it directly contradicts the modern hustle culture myth that we see everywhere today.
Oh, yeah, the whole burn the boats thing.
Right. We are constantly fed this narrative that true entrepreneurs burn the boats. You're supposed to risk it all, drop out of school, max out the credit cards, and just leap without a parachute.
Right, it's very dramatic.
But here, the guy who goes on to build one of the most iconic, rebellious brands in history is being told to go to Portland State University, swallow his Ivy League pride, take 9 credits of basic accounting, and get a highly conventional entry-level job.
Yeah, it's completely counterintuitive if you buy into the modern myth, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, what Frisbee is teaching him here is the concept of asymmetrical risk.
Asymmetrical risk. Break that down for us.
Well, it's arguably the most important mathematical concept in long-term business survival. We heavily romanticize that burn the boats mentality, but that is pure survivorship bias.
Oh, absolutely.
We only ever hear the stories of the people who burned their boats and somehow miraculously conquered the island.
Right, they write the books.
Exactly. We never hear the thousands of stories of people who burn their boats and quietly starve to death on the beach.
Oof. Yeah, that's a grim image, but it's true.
So asymmetrical risk is about finding ways to limit your downside to almost zero while leaving your upside infinite.
Okay, I see. So by getting the CPA, he's essentially capping his downside.
Right.
Because if the shoe business just goes to zero, he isn't out on the street, right? His salary floor as a CPA is highly stable.
Very stable. Accountants are always in demand.
But if the shoe business succeeds, the upside is, well, it's millions, or in his case, billions.
The math is just completely in his favor.
It reminds me of how a trapeze artist trains.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like if you go to the circus, the performer doesn't attempt the triple backflip blindfolded on day one. They don't just hope for the best.
No, they'd break their neck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They spend months, maybe years, building and testing a highly durable safety net below them. And they fall into that net hundreds of times.
Right.
But the safety net doesn't make them a coward. The safety net is exactly what gives them the psychological freedom to attempt the impossible trick high up in the air in the first place.
That is a perfect analogy. The CPA was his safety net.
Right.
Because building a credentialed floor, it just empowers future risk-taking because it removes that existential terror from the equation.
You're not worried about starving.
Exactly. When you know exactly how far you can fall and you know that falling won't destroy you financially, you can make much bolder, more aggressive decisions with your business later on.
You can take the big swings.
Yeah.
So he takes the advice, he goes back to school, he gets the credits, and he secures a job.
He does.
But the irony of building a safety net is that you actually have to live in it.
And that is the hard part.
It is. And for a guy who just spent a year climbing the Himalayas and walking the beaches of Waikiki, the fluorescent lights of a 1963 accounting firm were, a special kind of hell.
Oh, yeah, a massive reality check.
He starts working at Live Brand Ross Bros in Montgomery, which
Yeah.
was one of the big 8 national accounting firms at the time. And the reality of this job just hits him like a freight train.
Well, we have to remember what accounting looks like in 1963.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
There are no spreadsheets,
No Excel.
no personal computers at all. This is the era of massive physical paper ledgers, mechanical adding machines with that paper tape, and carbon copies.
Oh, man, just the physical labor of it.
Exactly. Finding a 2-cent discrepancy in a client's books could mean staying at your desk until 2 in the morning, manually recalculating columns of numbers.
That's brutal.
And during tax season, he is logging 12-hour days, 6 days a week. It is a grueling physical grind.
It's an absolute grind. And the culture of the firm is rigidly, coldly corporate.
Very old school.
Yeah. There's an anecdote in the source material that just stopped me in my tracks because it illustrates exactly what he was up against.
The JFK one, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
the JFK one. So in November of 1963, President John F. Kennedy is assassinated.
Right.
It's a profound national trauma. The entire country stops. Everyone remembers where they were.
A huge moment in history.
Right. So the founder asks his boss for the rest of the day off so he can go home, sit in front of the television, and just mourn with the rest of the country.
Which is a completely reasonable request.
Totally reasonable. But his boss refuses.
Wow.
He looks at him and says, quote, "Work first, mourn second."
It is such a chilling detail.
Isn't it? Like work first, mourn second.
Yeah, it perfectly encapsulates the extreme rigidity and emotional detachment of mid-century corporate America.
Yes.
You know, the company man was expected to compartmentalize everything, even a national tragedy in service of the firm's bottom line.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. You really have to wonder, at what point does this safety net become a prison?
That's the danger.
Right. If your boss is telling you to ignore the assassination of the President of the United States so you can keep crunching numbers on an adding machine, it feels like the floor you're building is actually a ceiling that's just slowly crushing you.
It's the ultimate test of his endurance, for sure.
It is. So why endure that level of corporate oppression? Why not just quit?
Well, because of the duality of the day job, and this is a tension almost every bootstrapping entrepreneur faces at some point.
How so?
Yes, the macro culture of the firm was oppressive, but you have to look at the micro level of what he was actually doing day to day.
Okay, like his specific tasks.
Right. As a junior accountant, he was assigned to audit a local company called Reeser's Fine Foods,
Okay.
which meant he was spending quality time inside a growing successful business, working directly with the CEO, Al Reeser, who was actually only a few years older than him.
Oh, wow. So he's getting this all-access pass to look under the hood of a real company. He isn't just crunching abstract numbers
Yeah.
for, faceless corporations. He's seeing the financial anatomy of a business that makes and distributes potato salad.
Right. He is getting paid to learn.
Getting paid to learn.
This is where the long-term value of the job really reveals itself, because by auditing Reeser's books, he is learning how a supply chain is financed.
Right.
He's seeing how seasonal demand affects cash flow. He's learning how payroll is managed, how debt is structured, and how a young CEO actually handles growth.
So it's basically a real-world MBA.
Exactly. He is receiving an incredible hands-on education in the financial mechanics of how businesses operate, succeed, and fail, and he's getting it without risking a single dime of his own capital.
Right? He's just drawing a salary while absorbing all these secrets.
Yeah.
It's so comparable to being a medical intern.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like the hours are terrible, the hierarchy is abusive, the hospital food is awful.
Right.
But you are getting paid to practice surgery on someone else's dime. You are learning the anatomy of the patient before you ever open your own private practice.
That completely reframes the concept of the day job, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because so many people view their 9 to 5 as a distraction from their ultimate dream, right?
Yeah.
They see it as this soul-sucking obstacle that just takes time away from their real work.
Yeah, they just want to escape it.
But if you view it as a paid apprenticeship, it changes your entire relationship with the work. You aren't just a cog in a machine anymore. You are a spy.
A spy. I love that.
Yeah. You are infiltrating the corporate world to learn the inner mechanics of operations so that when your own product finally arrives, you actually know how to run a company.
I love that framing so much. Being a corporate spy, gathering intel for your future empire.
It makes the boring stuff bearable.
It does. But, even a spy gets exhausted by the cover identity, right?
Oh, for sure.
The cognitive dissonance of living two lives starts to tear him apart. And this brings us to the emotional rock bottom of 1963 for him.
Yeah, it gets pretty dark here.
It does. He's working these brutal hours at the firm. He's making decent money, though. Like enough to actually buy a brand new car. It's a Plymouth Valiant.
And we have to mention the color.
Oh, we definitely have to mention the color.
In a highly specific shade that he describes as vomit green.
Vomit green.
Yeah.
But as he notes in the book, it's the color of newly minted money.
Right. He justifies it.
Yeah. So outwardly, to his parents, to his neighbors, to society, he is ticking all the boxes of mid-century American success.
He's checking all the boxes. He has the Stanford MBA. He's got the CPA credentials. He bought a new car.
Right. On paper, he is winning the game. But internally, the reality is entirely different.
It's completely different.
He is deeply, profoundly depressed.
And this raises an important question. How do visionaries survive the mundane? The contrast between his outward success and his internal despair is stark.
It really is.
The source material describes his lunch breaks in really vivid detail. He leaves the accounting firm, walks down the street to a travel agency, and just stares through the window at posters of Switzerland and Tahiti.
Just torturing himself, really.
Yeah, he's longing for the expansiveness of his past year. And then he goes to a park bench, he eats a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and literally talks to the pigeons.
It's so sad. He's sitting there asking the pigeons if the best moments of his life are already behind him.
Right.
Like he's 25 years old, and he is terrified that his trip around the world was his absolute peak.
That everything is just downhill from there.
Exactly. That everything from here on out is just a slow, vomit green decline into suburban mediocrity.
Yeah.
He hit such a low point that he writes a letter to his old travel companion, Carter, and he just plainly says, quote, "I'm an accountant now and giving some thought to blowing my brains out."
Which is just a really dark, stark admission.
Yeah. So what does this all mean? How does someone go from standing in the temple of Nike full of divine vision and purpose to contemplating the end on a park bench with a PB&J?
Well, we are looking at a very real psychological phenomenon here, which we can call the post-adventure slump.
Post-adventure slump.
It is the emotional whiplash of transitioning from the high of a visionary idea to the deeply mundane reality of actually funding it.
Right, the come down.
Exactly. When he was traveling the world seeking his purpose, pitching executives in Japan, his brain was just flooded with novelty and high-stakes decision-making and immense amounts of dopamine.
He was on an adventure.
He was operating on an elevated neurochemical plane, really.
It's like the depression you feel after returning from an incredible vacation, but magnified by 1,000 because your entire identity and your future are tied to it.
Precisely. The neurochemical drop-off from the Himalayas to a fluorescent-lit accounting firm is severe.
It's a cliff.
Yeah. But more importantly, this crucible of boredom is structurally essential to his journey.
Essential.
Okay.
How is being that depressed essential?
Because it is the ultimate test of his true commitment to the idea. Look, everyone loves the romantic phase of starting a business, the brainstorming, the travel, the big pitches.
Right. That's the fun part.
But very few people love the phase where you have to audit potato salad receipts for 12 hours a day just to afford the chance to start the business.
It's basically the cinematic equivalent of the training montage, except without the inspiring 80s synth music.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
No music, just adding machines.
Yeah. Usually in a movie about a successful founder, we get a quick fade, some fast cuts of a guy typing late at night with a cup of coffee, and then boom, the company's launched and he's rich.
We skip all the hard parts.
We completely skip the emotional reality of the waiting period. The reality is just a guy sitting on a bench with a sandwich entirely alone, wondering if he made a huge, humiliating mistake.
And you really have to acknowledge that the path to a crazy dream will inevitably involve periods of profound boredom, isolation, and existential doubt.
It's baked into the process.
It is. It is completely normal to feel like you've peaked or that the daily grind is destroying your soul. The critical error people make is mistaking that necessary, unglamorous grind for failure. The waiting, the depression, the account, none of that was a departure from his entrepreneurial journey.
Right.
It was the journey. It was the necessary friction required to build the foundation.
That's a great way to put it, the necessary friction. Because when you zoom out and look at a timeline of this company's history, the year 1963 looks like a typo.
It really does, like nothing.
Right, it looks like a lost year of absolute nothingness.
Yeah.
He didn't invent a new type of shoe. He didn't sign a famous athlete. He didn't make a single sale.
Not one.
He just waited, studied accounting, and crunched numbers in a soul-crushing office. But looking at the depth of what he learned and the resilience he was forced to build this year represents the true hidden soul of the entire enterprise.
Absolutely. It proves that behind every overnight success, behind every bold global vision that changes the world, there is a foundation built on something much less glamorous.
Yeah.
It requires immense patience. It requires strategic hedging, like we talked about, building that floor of hard skills and financial security.
The trapeze net.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly, it requires the willingness to endure absolute mind-numbing drudgery to keep the dream alive.
Because if he hadn't survived the silence of 1963, there would be no global footwear empire today.
None at all. He would have just quit and stayed an accountant.
It really is about surviving the silence. This whole year was about building the floor and waiting in the dark, trusting that the work was worth it, even when there was zero external validation.
Yes, zero.
But the beautiful thing about time is that it keeps moving.
It does indeed.
Next time we dive into this story, the calendar finally flips to 1964.
Oh, 1964 is a big year.
It is, and a mysterious box covered in Japanese writing finally arrives at the Portland waterfront. The wait is over.
I can't wait for that. And before we go, I think it's worth it for everyone listening to look at your own life right now. Are you currently in a waiting period?
Well, that's a good question.
Right. And if so, are you just sitting on the bench staring at the clock, or are you actively using this time to build your floor?
That is a phenomenal question. It's a question worth asking yourself every time you feel stuck.
Definitely.
So next time you're eating a PB&J, wondering if nothing is happening, remember, sometimes the loudest roar of success starts in the quietest, most agonizing moments of waiting. Keep building.
Imagine betting your life savings and your entire future on a product for a market that literally does not exist yet.
Yeah, it sounds like a terrible idea.
Right. I mean, imagine trying to sell gear to a group of people who are so misunderstood that drivers actively roll down their windows to throw sodas at their head.
Oh, yeah, just for running down the street.
Exactly. Today, we're looking at the year 1965, when the founders of a scrappy little shoe company decided to build an empire on the backs of, weirdos who like to run.
It really was a completely different world back then.
It really was. So for this deep dive, we are exploring Chapter 3 of Phil Knight's memoir, Shoe Dog.
Right, which covers exactly that year, 1965.
Yeah, and we are relying exclusively on Knight's firsthand accounts and his notes from this really pivotal era.
Which is great because we get the raw, unfiltered look at what it actually took to survive.
Completely. And in this deep dive, we are going to explore the critical transition of Blue Ribbon Sports.
Which, of course, is the company that would eventually become Nike.
Right, exactly. We're looking at how they went from this precarious side hustle into a real national player. So for anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship, this chapter is just an absolute masterclass in how fanatical customer obsession, relentless hacking of early products, and honestly a willingness to bluff when your back is against the wall can just will a company into existence.
Yeah, willing it into existence is the perfect way to phrase it, because they really had no business surviving.
No, none at all. So let's get into it. Let's start with this first huge key idea from the chapter, which revolves around their very first full-time employee.
Jeff Johnson.
Yes, Jeff Johnson. So explain to us who this guy was, because he wasn't your typical, corporate hire.
No, not at all. So Jeff Johnson was a social worker originally.
Okay.
And she becomes Blue Ribbon's first full-time employee.
Oh.
Now, you have to remember that in 1965, running wasn't a sport. It wasn't a hobby.
Right. It was just
It
weird.
was incredibly weird.
Yeah.
People thought you were running from the police or you were just out of your mind.
Hence the sodas being thrown at them.
Exactly. So Johnson, he wasn't just hired to sell shoes. He actually viewed himself as this sort of missionary.
The missionary.
Yeah, he's trying to build a community for what he saw as oppressed runners. Like, he really felt they were this marginalized group.
Wow.
And he was so dedicated to this vision that he actually took a pay cut. I think he was making around $460 a month as a social worker, and he dropped down to $400 a month just to do this full-time for Blue Ribbon.
That is wild. I mean, taking a pay cut to join a startup is one thing today, with stock options and everything. But back then,
Right, there was no massive tech buyout waiting for him. It was just shoes.
just shoes out of a car.
Literally.
Here.
He sold these shoes out of his VW bus at track meets 7 days a week.
7 days a week.
Yeah, he was just everywhere. And what's really amazing is his customer service.
Mm.
Because he didn't just sell you a shoe and say goodbye. He created this massive manual index card database.
Right, the index cards. I was reading about this. It's fascinating.
It's basically an analog CRM system before those even existed. He would write down customer shoe sizes, obviously, but also their personal preferences, their race times.
Wow.
And then he'd use that to send them birthday cards, Christmas cards.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and if a high school kid ran a personal best on a Saturday, Johnson would send a congratulatory note in the mail.
That is just incredible. Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because if I compare Johnson to like a modern community manager or someone building a cult brand today, it's brilliant. But is it actually dangerous to hire someone whose fanatical vision outpaces the company's bank account? I mean, Phil Knight literally told Johnson at one point that the company was sinking like the Titanic.
Right, and Johnson is out there buying stamps for Christmas cards.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
how does that make business sense when you're going under?
Well, what's fascinating here is that Johnson's social worker background was actually his superpower.
Okay, how so?
He didn't sell to consumers. He counseled them.
Ah, I see.
Right. He wasn't pushing a product. He was solving their problems. And when you don't have a marketing budget, when you have $0 to run ads against giant companies like Adidas or Puma, that unscalable, deeply personal customer obsession is literally your only weapon.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You can't outspend them, so you just outcare them.
Exactly. And the practical takeaway here for anyone building something is that you need to hire missionaries, not mercenaries.
Ooh, I like that. Missionary is not mercenary.
Yeah, because a mercenary is just there for the paycheck. When the company is sinking like the Titanic, the mercenary gets on a lifeboat.
Right.
But the missionary, the guy who believes he's saving oppressed runners, he stays and bails water. Early growth really relies on that kind of unscalable, totally irrational obsession.
That is such a good point, and it really bleeds into our second key idea, which is all about how this obsession translated into the actual product. Because product development in these early days, it wasn't happening in high-tech labs.
Oh, not even close.
It was happening by listening to the exact pain points of the end user and just physically hacking solutions together with whatever was lying around. It's like the era of the Frankenstein flat.
The Frankenstein flat, yes. That is exactly what it was.
Yeah, so tell the story about the Boston Marathon runner, because this is just a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Oh, this is one of my favorite anecdotes from the text. So Johnson has this customer who is running the Boston Marathon. And this runner wants to wear the Tiger Flats, which is the Japanese shoe they were importing.
Right.
But the soles on these track shoes are super thin. And the runner knows that over 26 miles of hard asphalt, his feet are just going to be destroyed. He needs more cushion.
Which didn't exist in track shoes at the time.
No, track shoes were basically slippers with spikes or thin rubber. So Johnson listens to this problem, and instead of writing a memo to R&D, he just takes a pair of standard rubber shower shoes.
Like flip-flops.
Basically, yeah. Thick rubber shower sandals.
Yeah.
And he takes them, along with the Tiger Flats, to a local cobbler. And he pays the cobbler to literally slice the thick rubber soles off the shower shoes and graft them directly onto the bottom of the track shoes.
That is wild.
He just Frankensteins them together. And the best part, the runner wears them and gets a personal best at Boston.
Oh, wow. So he literally invented a new midsole just out of sheer desperation.
Exactly. And it wasn't just Johnson doing this. If you flash back to the origins of Mr. Onitsuka, the guy making the tiger shoes in Japan, he had that exact same hacker mentality.
Right, the wax story.
Yeah, so Onitsuka's trying to figure out how to make a proper basketball shoe mold. He needs to capture the exact shape of a human foot, So he literally takes melting Buddhist candle wax and pours it directly over his own feet.
Ouch, that sounds incredibly painful.
Very painful, but it worked to get the cast he needed. And then for the traction on the bottom of the basketball shoe, he gets the inspiration while he's eating.
Wait, eating what?
He's eating octopus.
Oh, right, I remember this.
Yeah, he's looking at the octopus leg on his plate, sees the suction cups, and realizes that's the perfect mechanism for gripping a hardwood floor.
That is just brilliant. It's like open source software, but for hardware. You find a bug in reality, and you just patch it with whatever you have. Shower shoes, candle wax, octopus tentacles.
Exactly.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Because where do you draw the line between, scrappy innovation and just ruining your inventory? Because Bill Bowerman, Phil Knight's partner and the track coach at Oregon, he was famous for this too, right?
Oh, Bowerman was notorious for it.
Yeah, he would get these brand new, expensive shoes from Japan, and he would immediately tear them apart.
Yep, rip them right out of the box.
So if you're a startup struggling for cash, isn't destroying your only product a terrible idea?
Well, you have to look at the parallel obsession here. The Japanese shoes were designed for the Japanese physique, which was generally lighter. But Bowerman is coaching these larger, heavier American athletes.
Oh.
So when these bigger guys hit the track, the force was just tearing up their Achilles tendons and their arches. The shoes couldn't handle it. So Bowerman is tearing apart the Tigers to add custom arch supports and heel wedges, specifically for these larger bodies.
So he was ruining the inventory to save his athletes.
Exactly. And he didn't stop there. He was also in his kitchen mixing up, like, mushed bananas, lemonade, tea, and honey.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, it supposedly tasted terrible. But he was trying to invent a sports elixir, an electrolyte drink, years before Gatorade was a thing.
Wow.
The point is, innovation is inherently messy and destructive. You can't be precious about your inventory if it's not solving the user's problem.
Yeah, that makes total sense. The practical takeaway here is just don't wait for perfection or for some fancy R&D department. You have to listen to your most demanding users and hack a solution today, even if you have to use shower shoes to do it.
Exactly.
Okay, so they have this fanatical employee. They have these hacked together innovative products. But none of that matters if the bank shuts you down. Which brings us to the third key idea, the equity trap. And this concept of failing fast.
Yeah, this is where the stress level of the chapter really goes off the charts.
Oh, I was getting secondhand anxiety just reading it. So let's explore this existential threat of cash flow. Because Phil is dealing with his bank, First National, and they are not happy with him.
Not at all.
They refuse to extend him any more credit because Blue Ribbon lacked what they called equity. So can you explain what equity actually means in this specific 1965 context and why traditional banks hated Phil's strategy so much?
Sure. So to a bank back then, equity basically meant cash or hard assets, things they could easily liquidate if you didn't pay your loan back.
The safety net.
Exactly. It's the cushion. But Phil didn't have a cushion. His entire strategy was aggressive growth. Whenever he made $1, he didn't put it in a savings account. He immediately used it to buy 2 more pairs of shoes. He was trying to grow fast enough to matter before the big brands crushed him. But to the bank, this looked like a guy driving a car at 100 miles an hour with no brakes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So describe the dynamic between the people involved here, because it's a very human conflict. You've got Phil, and then you've got this guy, Harry White, and then the main banker, Wallace.
Right, so it's this tense triangle. You have Phil, who is desperate for cash to keep growing. Then you have Harry White, who is this sort of supportive middleman at the bank. He actually likes Phil. He respects the hustle, but he's constrained by the bank's rules.
And then there's Wallace.
Right, Wallace. He's the stern, old-school banker who actually holds the purse strings. Wallace doesn't care about running or track shoes. He cares about risk. And Phil is nothing but risk. Wallace is demanding that Phil slow down and leave cash in his account, which would effectively kill Blue Ribbon's momentum.
So to deal with this constant crushing stress of maybe being shut down any day, Phil adopts this internal mantra. He repeats the phrase, fail fast to himself every single day.
Yeah, it was his coping mechanism.
But so what does this all mean? Because today, fail fast is this huge Silicon Valley buzzword. You launch an app, it has a bug, you fail fast, you iterate, it's safe. But in 1965, didn't failing fast mean something much more literal and terrifying? Isn't there a fine line between failing fast and just running a company into the ground?
That is a great distinction to make. Yes, modern fail fast is a product development strategy. But for Phil Knight, it was psychological armor.
Psychological armor.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have this fundamental tension between a traditional bank's need for security and a startup's need for momentum. Growth requires cash, but cash requires proof of stability.
It's a total catch-22.
Exactly, and that catch-22 kills most startups. So for Phil, fail fast meant accepting that total failure was a real daily possibility. He was telling himself, if we're going to crash, let's crash at top speed, trying to win, rather than slowly bleeding to death because the bank made us slow down.
Wow. So it wasn't about tweaking a product feature. It was about facing absolute ruin and just accelerating anyway.
Right. The practical takeaway here is that you have to understand the financial mechanisms that govern your business. Momentum is a startup's greatest asset, but you have to build the psychological resilience to accept that you might lose everything.
That is so intense, and that intensity just boils over into the climax of the chapter. Which brings us to our fourth key idea, which I want to call the ultimate bluff.
Oh man, the Onitsuka showdown.
Yes. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because earlier, to get Johnson to back off about wanting his own store, Phil gives him this seemingly impossible quota. He tells Johnson, if you can sell 3,250 pairs by June 1966, you can open a retail space.
Right. Phil completely thought it was impossible.
But Johnson crushes it.
He does. He sells the shoes, and he opens this absolute runner's mecca in Santa Monica. It's got couches, books. It's a real hub.
Which is amazing, but of course, right when they have this huge victory, an existential threat pops up.
They can't catch a break.
No. So Onitsuka, the Japanese supplier, starts considering dropping Blue Ribbon entirely.
Yeah, they want a larger distributor, somebody with actual money.
Right. So Phil has to fly to Japan on a desperate mission to save his company. Detail this trip for us, because this is where the bluff happens.
Okay, so Phil flies to Japan, and he's facing this stern new export manager named Kitami.
Right.
Phil knows he's on the ropes, so instead of begging to just keep the West Coast, he goes on the offensive. He demands exclusive national distribution rights for the entire United States.
Which is incredibly bold.
Insanely bold. And Kitami initially rejects him, just says no.
Oh, man.
So Phil goes back to his hotel room, and he paces the floor in absolute despair for 2 whole nights. He thinks it's over. He thinks he's lost the company.
But then
Miraculously, Kitami calls him back. He grants Phil a 3-year exclusive deal for the U.S.
Unbelievable.
But then Kitami asks about Blue Ribbon's East Coast office.
And this is the moment.
This is it. Phil knows that if he says they don't have an East Coast office, Kitami will pull the deal and give it to a bigger company. So Phil looks him in the eye and bluffs. He says, yes, we have an East Coast office. And he immediately orders $20,000 worth of shoes to be shipped to this office that absolutely does not exist.
Okay, I have to stop here. Because is fake it till you make it actually ethical business? Or did Phil just get incredibly lucky here by lying about the East Coast office? I mean, he just lied to his partner's face to secure a deal.
This raises a really important question about survival in business. You have to look at the dynamics of negotiation and leverage.
Okay.
Phil had 0 leverage. Onitsuka had the shoes, the factories, the power. Phil only had his momentum. So yes, technically it was a lie. But Phil didn't lie out of malice. He wasn't trying to scam Onitsuka.
Right, he fully intended to sell those shoes.
Exactly. He willed a reality into existence because the alternative was immediate, fatal death for his company. He knew that if he could just get the shoes, he and Johnson would figure out how to sell them. He bet on his own ability to make the lie become the truth.
Wow. So the practical takeaway here is that sometimes you just have to secure the deal first and build the infrastructure second.
Yeah. Boldness and a well-timed bluff can overcome a massive lack of resources.
That is just incredible. So bringing all these threads together, we've got Johnson the missionary, Bowerman destroying shoes to innovate, Phil battling the bank and bluffing the Japanese executives. When you synthesize all of this into one memorable insight, what is the soul of this chapter?
It really comes down to the sheer power of unreasonable belief.
Unreasonable belief.
Yes, none of what they did was reasonable. Johnson unreasonably believed running could be a community. Bowerman unreasonably believed he could engineer the perfect shoe out of scraps. And Phil Knight unreasonably believed his tiny cash-starved company deserved to conquer the country, even when his bank accounts were empty.
They willed a market into existence long before the infrastructure was there to support it.
Exactly. They didn't wait for the market to be ready. They forced it to be ready.
And that brings us to the immediate fallout of Phil's massive bluff. Because Phil has his shoes, he has his national contract, and he has a massive shipment of $20,000 worth of shoes steaming across the ocean toward a phantom East Coast office.
Yep, the clock is ticking.
It is. Now, all he has to do is go back to California and convince his star employee, Jeff Johnson, who, remember, just built the retail store of his dreams in Santa Monica, to drop absolutely everything and move across the country before the boat docks.
Yeah, that is going to be a very tough conversation.
Oh, I would not want to be in that room. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one last provocative thought to ponder on your own. Think about your own career or business right now. If a vital partner called your bluff today, do you have a Jeff Johnson in your corner who is fanatical enough to drop everything and build a new reality for you from scratch?
It's a great question. Because if you don't, you might just be building with mercenaries.
Exactly. Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one. What would you do if the survival of your entire company, like literally depended on a single question, and your only way out was to look a really powerful executive in the eye and tell a massive, high-stakes lie?
Oh, man.
Right.
That is the ultimate nightmare scenario.
It really is. And today, we're looking at the exact moment a 20-something entrepreneur did exactly that. It's basically the story of jumping out of an airplane and deciding you're just going to, build your parachute on the way down.
Hoping you figure it out before you hit the ground.
Exactly. Hoping you figure it out.
It is the ultimate test of nerve for any founder. It's that terrifying threshold where the reality you actually live in clashes completely with the reality you have to project just to stay alive in the room.
Right.
And I think the most fascinating part is that this wasn't an isolated incident. I mean, it was a pattern of behavior that defined an entire era for a brand that, most people wear every single day.
Yeah, which brings us to why we are here today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive. We are opening up the pages of Phil Knight's memoir, Shoe Dog.
Fantastic book.
Oh, incredible. And we're zooming in on one specific highly pivotal year, which is 1966. We're pulling our focus specifically to pages 97 to 111 of his retrospective account here. Because our mission today is to explore how this bizarre mix of strategic silence, some truly grassroots innovation by extremely passionate employees, and one monumental bluff transformed Blue Ribbon Sports from this scrappy West Coast hustle into a national operation.
Yeah, if you're looking at how a company survives its most fragile infancy, 1966 is the crucible for Blue Ribbon Sports.
Definitely.
We're looking at a masterclass in survival, but definitely not the polished theoretical kind they teach you in a traditional MBA program.
Right. No case studies here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's raw, it's messy, and it relies heavily on people doing things they were explicitly not told to do.
Which is the best kind of business story, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
So to really grasp the tension, we have to paint the picture of where Phil Knight is mentally and physically in 1966. He's at a massive crossroads.
Right.
His contract with his Japanese shoe supplier, Onitsuka, is nearing its end. And we have to remember, in 1966, you don't just, shoot off an email or a text to check on a contract.
No, you wait for the mail.
You wait for the mail. Phil is sitting there day after day waiting for three really crucial envelopes. He's waiting for one from his bank, one from Onitsuka about whether he, still has a business, and one from a girl named Sarah.
Right.
But the only mail he is actually getting is an absolute avalanche of letters from his full-time employee, Jeff Johnson.
And we really have to understand the volume of this correspondence.
Right.
Johnson isn't just sending a weekly sales report.
No.
He is sending letters constantly. I mean, he's writing about marketing ideas, customer complaints, his own personal philosophies on running. He's tweaking shoe designs.
That's a lot.
It is a relentless stream of consciousness from a guy who is operating out on the front lines in California while Phil is up in Oregon.
And Phil's reaction to this absolute onslaught is wild to me. He completely ignores them.
He does.
He just lets the letters pile up.
Yeah, and Phil rationalizes this silence through his reading material. Because at this time, he is consuming books on, great generals, samurai, and leaders like Winston Churchill, John F. Kennedy, Leo Tolstoy.
Wow. Okay.
He's absorbing this overarching philosophy that business is war without bullets.
Right.
So in his mind, he is convincing himself that a true leader maintains a stoic, men-of-few-words demeanor. He is deliberately acting the part of the silent, impenetrable commander.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though, because
Yeah.
I really struggled to buy Phil's self-awareness here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, is he actually adopting a calculated samurai management style, or is he just a conflict-avoidant 20-something who honestly has no idea how to manage an over-enthusiastic employee?
That's a fair point.
Because leaving your most passionate employee twisting in the wind just because their energy is a bit much, it feels a lot more like ghosting than it does a brilliant military strategy.
I see what you're saying.
I mean, it sounds like an excuse for bad management.
You're looking at it through a very modern lens, though.
Okay, fair.
You have to remember the context of 1966 corporate culture. I mean, Phil is looking up to post-WAII business titans and military leaders.
Right. The war wasn't that long ago for them.
Exactly. And in that era, distance equaled authority. The boss wasn't your friend. The boss was an untouchable figure on a completely different floor.
Yeah, that's true.
Phil thinks he's being Churchill, right? Leading from the bunker. Now, does it look like ghosting to us today? Sure. But he genuinely believes that responding to every single frantic letter would dilute his authority.
But the result is the same. He's like a coach leaving his best player on the field without a playbook, just hoping the player figures it out because the coach doesn't want to micromanage.
It's a dangerous game, absolutely. If we step back and look at the mechanics of leadership here, Phil's management style is completely disconnected from the reality of his team.
Totally.
While micromanaging can stifle creativity, extreme hands-off leadership can completely alienate your best people. You don't have to answer every single letter, obviously, but absolute silence creates a void.
Yeah, nature abhors a vacuum.
Right. A team member like Johnson is begging for direction, for validation, and he's getting a literal brick wall.
But that void is exactly where things take a really bizarre turn. Because Phil's silence is incredibly frustrating for Johnson, right? But because Johnson is getting absolutely zero top-down direction from his, bunker general boss, he is forced to fill that vacuum himself.
Yes.
He starts innovating entirely from the bottom up.
Which is how you get one of the most remarkable grassroots innovations in the history of footwear, actually.
It's amazing.
Because Johnson is left to his own devices, he stops operating like a traditional salesman. He starts acting more like a cult leader for runners.
A cult leader for runners. I love that description.
Well, think about what running was in 1966.
Right.
It wasn't a widespread recreational activity. People didn't just jog for fitness.
No, not at all.
If you were running down the street, people assumed you were running from the police.
Literally.
It was a fringe activity. But Johnson views running not just as a hobby, but as a mystical, almost religious exercise.
Wow.
And he views his work selling these shoes not as a job, but as a calling.
He's fully bought in. I mean, he's taking injured customers to the doctor himself.
Yeah.
He is gathering all their feedback, aggregating their complaints, their blisters, their shin splints. Long before the internet made brand communities a standard marketing tactic, Johnson was building a fiercely loyal face-to-face community out of his car and his storefront.
He was creating open source software before software existed.
Yes.
And because he is so embedded in that community, he hears a very specific recurring pain point that the manufacturers in Japan are completely oblivious to.
Which leads right to the Boston Marathon story.
Yes, the famous Boston story.
Yeah. So Johnson has a customer who wants to run Boston, but the guy is complaining that the Onitsuka Tiger flat shoes just don't have enough cushion to survive 26 miles on asphalt.
Right.
And we should clarify for a second. Running shoes in 1966 were essentially flat strips of leather with a very thin layer of rubber on the bottom.
Basically spikes without the metal.
Exactly. They were designed for dirt tracks, not miles of pavement. They absolutely destroyed people's Achilles tendons.
Right. The biomechanics of running on pavement hadn't been solved by shoe companies yet. The impact forces were just going straight up the runner's legs.
It sounds painful just thinking about it.
Oh, brutal.
So what does Johnson do? He doesn't write a memo to Phil. He knows Phil won't answer anyway.
Nope.
He doesn't petition the Japanese manufacturer to change their multi-million-dollar assembly line. He literally takes matters into his own hands. He hires a local cobbler to graft the rubber soles of shower shoes onto the bottom of the Tiger flats.
I still can't get over this. He took the foam from bathroom shower shoes.
Yes. He essentially takes that spongy, EVA foam you'd wear in a locker room, and he glues it between the leather upper and the rubber outsole of the running shoe.
It's genius.
He Frankensteins a brand new piece of footwear, and the result is this. For the time, space-age, full-length midsole cushioning.
Right.
The customer wears them, runs the Boston Marathon, and hits a personal best.
Wow.
I mean, it is the definition of user-driven R&D, like modern life hacking.
The mechanics of why that worked are brilliant. By adding that layer of shower shoe foam Johnson accidentally invented the modern midsole.
Which every shoe has today.
Every single one.
Yeah.
He created a shock absorber that distributed the kinetic energy of striking the pavement.
Right.
And he only knew to do this because he was the one looking at the bruised feet of his customers.
Right.
This proves that your frontline employees aren't just selling your product. I mean, they are your actual research and development department.
Absolutely.
They know the end user's needs intimately because they're dealing with the friction every single day.
And it only happened because Phil was ignoring him.
That's the irony.
If Phil had been a traditional responsive manager, he might have said, Jeff, stop playing with glue and just sell the inventory we have.
Exactly. The silence bred the innovation.
Yeah.
But it also bred intense resentment.
Oh, for sure.
You can only operate in a vacuum, just driving yourself crazy with passion for so long before you demand validation.
Right.
So Johnson's intense dedication eventually collides head-on with Phil's stoic silence, leading to an ultimatum.
Feeling entirely unappreciated, Johnson threatens to quit.
Mm-hmm.
He tells Phil he wants a partnership. He wants equity in Blue Ribbon Sports.
Yeah.
And, from Johnson's perspective, he's designing the shoes, he's selling the shoes, he's building the community. Of course he wants a piece of the pie.
Right. It's completely justified in his mind.
Yeah.
And Phil, true to his established form, doesn't give him a straight yes or no.
Of course not.
He manages him by setting a seemingly impossible hurdle. He tells Johnson, if you can sell 3,250 pairs of shoes by the end of June 1966, you won't get equity, but you'll be allowed to open your own dedicated retail outlet.
Which, by Phil's own internal math, is a wildly impossible quota.
It's astronomical for a guy selling out of his car in a tiny space.
Which brings up a really interesting psychological question for me.
Okay.
Does setting an impossible quota for a complaining employee mean you actually want them to fail? So they just quit and stop bothering you? Or is Phil playing some 4D chess, setting a high-stakes test designed to unlock Johnson's true potential?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
To understand Phil's motivation there, you really have to look at how Phil is living his own life in 1966. Phil is operating under a philosophy that we would now call fail fast, but he's living it in extreme contradictory ways.
The juxtaposition of his life is crazy.
It's unbelievable.
He finally moves out of his parents' basement and rents this spiffy new high-rise apartment downtown. It costs $200 a month, which, that was a very real chunk of change back then.
Oh, definitely. A huge expense.
He does this because he wants to project the image of a real executive, right? A guy running a successful international import business.
But the reality behind the door of that high-rise is completely different.
Oh, it's grim. He is so completely broke that he doesn't even buy a bed.
No bad.
He sleeps on the bare floor. He eats grape nuts because he can't afford real groceries.
Grape nuts.
I mean, he is buying the facade of success while living in absolute poverty.
Because internally, Phil genuinely believes Blue Ribbon might fail.
Right.
The odds are entirely against him. He is wildly undercapitalized. His supplier is thousands of miles away across the Pacific, and he's operating on razor-thin margins.
It's a house of cards.
Truly. But he adopts this mantra. He decides if he's going to go bust, he wants it to happen quickly.
Go fast.
Exactly. If his goal is to eventually be a successful entrepreneur, he views this current venture as an experiment. If it crashes, he wants to take whatever hard-won wisdom he gains and just apply it to his next company.
He figures that if he fails, he'll be crushed. And he'll be broke, but he'll have the knowledge.
Yes.
The failure isn't a dead end. It's just a really expensive tuition fee for his business education.
That mindset completely removes the paralyzing sting of taking risks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If your worst-case scenario is simply, accelerated learning, you make bolder moves. And I think that applies to how he manages Johnson.
Okay, how so?
Well, I don't think Phil set the quota hoping Johnson would quit. I think Phil was applying his own fail-fast pressure to his employee. He was pushing the engine into the red line to see if it would blow up or break the speed record.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, he was testing the limits of the machine.
So he sets this impossible trap for Johnson, and then, as if things aren't stressful enough, Phil immediately gets drafted into the Army Reserves for 2 weeks at Fort Lewis.
Talk about terrible timing.
Unbelievable timing. He is totally cut off from the world. No phone, no mail, absolutely no idea what is happening with his fragile company.
Just isolated.
So when his 2 weeks are up and he returns to civilian life, he discovers something that changes everything.
Johnson actually hit the quota.
He sold the 3,250 pairs.
It's incredible.
The guy took the impossible number and crushed it.
Which fundamentally shifts the dynamic of Blue Ribbon Sports. Phil now has undeniable proof of massive explosive demand.
Right. It's not just a hobby anymore.
No, it's a real business with real traction. And he gets this proof just in time for the most critical meeting of his life.
The Kitami meeting.
The Kitami meeting. Kitami is the powerful executive from Onitsuka, the Japanese manufacturer. Phil is summoned to meet with him, and frankly, Phil goes in feeling pretty confident.
I mean, he has Johnson's insane sales numbers right in his briefcase.
Exactly. He feels armed and ready.
He proudly presents the growth. He shows Kitami that Blue Ribbon hit $44,000 in sales for 1966, and they are projecting $84,000 for 1967.
Doubling year over year.
They are doubling year over year. So based on this, Phil confidently asks for exclusive U.S. distribution rights for the track and field line. He thinks it's an absolute slam dunk.
But Kitami doesn't even blink.
No.
He coldly rejects the offer. He tells Phil that Onitsuka wants a bigger, more established firm to handle their U.S. distribution.
They want a real company.
Right. They want a company with nationwide offices.
Yeah.
They do not want a small, scrappy operation based entirely on the West Coast.
And just like that, the ground completely falls out from under Phil.
Total free fall.
The Japanese are about to pull the rug out from under his entire life's work. If he loses this contract, he has no product.
None.
Blue Ribbon is dead. He has a matter of seconds to save his company, so he makes a wildly reckless decision.
He looks Kitami in the eye and claims that Blue Ribbon does have an East Coast office.
A complete fabricator.
It's an astronomical lie.
It is the business equivalent of claiming you are completely fluent in Spanish on a job resume, getting the job based on that lie, and then having to frantically binge Duolingo on the train ride to your first day of work, hoping nobody notices you don't actually know the language.
That captures the terror of the moment perfectly.
Right.
Phil invents a phantom East Coast office out of thin air, knowing full well that if Kitami asks for an address or a phone number, the entire house of cards collapses right there in the boardroom.
It's so risky.
But here's the crazy part. It works.
It actually works.
Kitami buys the lie. He grants Phil a 3-year exclusive contract for the United States.
The relief Phil must have felt in that moment is unimaginable.
Oh, the adrenaline dump would be insane.
But he doesn't just take the win, wipe the sweat from his forehead, and walk away.
No, he doesn't.
He immediately doubles down on the bluff. He places a massive order for 5,000 pairs of shoes, which costs $20,000, and he tells Kitami to ship those shoes directly to his East Coast office.
The office that does not exist?
Right. But wait, how does he even place a $20,000 order when we just established he's sleeping on the floor and eating grape nuts? How does the mechanics of that even work?
It comes down to the mechanics of international trade in the 1960s.
Yeah.
You didn't just wire cash instantly like we do today.
Okay.
You used letters of credit from your bank. So Phil is essentially floating the credit, buying himself time between when the order is placed, when the shoes are manufactured in Japan, when they are put on a cargo ship across the Pacific, and when the bill actually comes due.
Wow.
He is betting that he can sell enough of his current inventory to cover the letter of credit by the time the $20,000 bill hits his desk.
He's juggling chainsaws.
He really is.
He commits to $20,000 he doesn't have for a shipment heading to a building that isn't real.
But this reveals something fundamental about the nature of growth, I think.
What do you mean?
Well, sometimes growth requires making a commitment you are not completely ready for.
Right.
By projecting a reality that doesn't exist yet. An East Coast office, a national footprint. You force yourself to build the infrastructure to match your ambition.
Fake it till you make it on a corporate scale.
Exactly. If he hadn't lied, the company would have died that day. By lying, he created a biological imperative to survive. He now literally has to build an East Coast office before that cargo ship arrives, or he's completely ruined.
When you lay it all out like that, you realize he's running the exact same playbook in every single area of his life.
It is entirely consistent.
He acts like a stoic samurai general in his mind, trying to project military authority to his employee, even though he's just a guy who doesn't know how to write an email back, or, well, a letter back, rather.
Right.
He rents a fancy $200 a month high-rise apartment to project the image of a successful CEO to anyone walking by, even though he's sleeping on the floor because he can't afford a mattress.
Yep.
And finally, he invents a phantom East Coast office out of thin air to project nationwide scale to his supplier.
The thread connecting all these moments in 1966 is that the reality you project often becomes the reality you inhabit.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Phil forced himself to grow into the oversized suit he was wearing. But it is vital to recognize that this strategy only works if you have a team executing flawlessly behind the scenes.
Because he couldn't do it alone.
Not at all.
Hmm.
Phil's bluffs, his empty apartment, his samurai silence, none of it survives without Jeff Johnson in the trenches.
The guy doing the actual work.
Right. The guy grafting shower shoes to sneakers and turning impossible quotas into reality. He is the engine that makes the founder's bluff possible.
Which sets up an absolutely wild logistical nightmare for the next phase of the story.
Oh, it's going to be a mess.
Because now Phil has $20,000 worth of shoes sitting on a slow boat from Japan, headed for an address on the East Coast that he hasn't even picked out yet.
Right.
And his only move is to convince the one guy who absolutely loves California, Jeff Johnson, to drop his entire life, move across the country, and intercept that shipment before the lie is exposed to the Japanese executives.
He essentially has to draft the guy he's been ignoring to save his life.
It is going to be a fascinating collision of personalities.
Definitely.
So as we wrap up this dive into 1966, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We constantly hear that honesty and transparency are the best policies in business and leadership. But looking at Phil Knight sitting across from Kitami, where exactly is the line between a visionary projecting a future reality and a desperate founder just telling a massive lie to survive? Consider your own ambitions, your own goals. What is the East Coast office you might need to speak into existence today?
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.